Welcome attendees to the second webinar we've done today on the United VMS Easy Client, as you see over on the right hand side. And as you see right below it, it sort of describes it in a one sentence area. It is the lightweight, feature-rich web browser-based client application, complementary or possibly even a replacement for customers' control center client applications that we've had forever. So as you can see by the date on the bottom, it is the 22nd of February. It possibly is the 23rd if you're listening to this. That's why we do them at this time, because we're a global company and we want to make sure that we get to everybody. If you look on the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see the GoToWebinar software, and you'll notice down towards the bottom there is a questions section. Go ahead and fire those questions in here at your leisure. That's why we're doing these interactive webinars, so we can get some interaction. I have with me in the background my boss and longtime training manager for FLIR, Chris Winbun. He's just going to stay in the background, answer some of the questions that come up, and if there's something particularly interesting, he'll cut in and we'll give him the floor, and then he'll be able to talk about whatever it is that was brought up in that questions section. So if you go to the next slide here, we're just going to start off with a quick agenda, and you can see it's not a very long agenda. All right, this is the Easy Client. We're going to start off with this quick slide presentation here, get right out of the slides as fast as possible. Got to talk about some of the things that you need to keep in mind when you're using your Easy Client. And then before we go to the live demo, which you can see is the third one there, well, I see if there's any questions in the queue. This morning, there were no questions in that queue after we went through the quick slide presentation, but I still like to give an option in case they're there. And then after that brief question section, you can see we're going to do the live Easy Client demo. We're going to walk through the live and the playback and all of the features that we've got in it. And then finally, I'm going to close out the webinar with some more questions or anything that arises throughout the webinar. This morning when we did it, there were quite a few questions at the end actually. However, because of that, I'll probably add some of the content that I left out into the webinar, so we'll probably have a few less questions. But again, please feel free to use that section. So as we go forward, of course, we're talking about United VMS, and you can see there the picture in the front is Control Center, the full-blown full-featured client that we've had for a long time as part of our United VMS. Behind it is its brother, its new cousin, possibly, and the Easy Client. You can see last year, United VMS did win a couple of industry awards that we're quite proud of. I think we sort of win these type of awards in particular because we seek out customers and what they want, right? We started off the Easy Client way back in 7.0 when it first came out, and I've seen the improvements that we've added to the Easy Client. Now keep in mind, it is intended to be, on the next slide, I missed the transition there, but you can see it is the web browser based alternative / companion to the full-blown Control Center. And you can see right there, we have desktop, we have a laptop, it appears to be, and then some sort of tablet. Pretty much anywhere that you can use a browser, you can utilize the Easy Client, even on phones for that matter, although it would be much smaller. And there is one thing to point out about just mentioning browsers. You can see on this next slide here, these are the browsers that are compatible with the Easy Client. From the beginning, these have been the same ones, except of course we added Microsoft Edge at the bottom because it didn't exist when the Easy Client first came out. You'll note that there are some version recommendations basically for each one of the browsers. That's over on the right hand side. That's the first red number that's in the little gray box. So the second red number in each gray box, of course, is the limitation or how many cameras that you can actually view live in the Easy Client. You can see both Chrome and Opera. You can actually see 9 in a sort of 3x3 grid like the Brady Bunch, and Internet Explorer, and then its newer cousin, Microsoft Edge, of course, can also only see 6 at the same time. It was optimized for Chrome when it was first built. However, it does work fine on all of the browsers. I use them all the time. Now, taking a look at some of the features, of course, that we've added to the Easy Client. Now, keep in mind, as I mentioned, when we first came out with the Easy Client, the whole intention was to be the core work, basically, of what our clients are using the client application for, what our customers are using it for. So we developed it around that, right? Live view, playback, exporting, a little bit of querying, some forensic work. But since we released it, a lot of things have been added to it. Like I was mentioning earlier, a lot of the stuff we've come up on our own, of course, because that's what we do. However, we do listen to the customers, and if the customers, for instance, one you can see in red there, right, in that list on the left, under alarms. When it was first released, we wanted to give our customers mobility, right? To be able to actually see your cameras outside of the control room environment, which is pretty much what you were used to using it. So we give them mobility, and the customers came back and they said, that's great. We love it. We love the mobility. We can open it up on any browser. But if my guard is out on his rounds, taking his iPad with him, he's not getting alarms, right? And that was a problem. So we said, you know what? We're going to add alarms. And we did. So there's been a number of things that we've added each time we have a latitude update, or an LU, we call them. I'm sure you guys are familiar with those. We always seem to be adding new features to them. And you can see on the left-hand side, just to run down the list, it is touch optimized. We have live and playback. It toggles back and forth, right? Unlike the full-blown version of Control Center. Again, it was originally designed just to be what did they say in the beginning? The feature-rich, lightweight version, right? It's got a dynamic camera layout on the right-hand side. You're actually looking at playback on that particular dynamic there. Adaptive streaming, I bolded it because it was just added in our last latitude update. And basically what that allows you to do is use multi-stream encoding. If you're zooming into a picture, for instance, or if you're using digital zoom, or cropping it, using that digital zoom, it will reach out and grab any available extra streams, higher resolution streams. And that stops your camera from pixelating as you zoom, possibly like into a back of a parking lot or something like that. We do have a camera sight filter. If you're using sites, if you're using our system, you know what sites are. They're a very good way that we set up in Admin Center, and then are used in Control Center to sort of group things either hierarchically by geography or by logical things like that. And we have a filter for that, so you can actually look at the cameras. You can put certain cameras in different sites, and then you can filter the cameras that you actually see on the left-hand side right there in your camera catalog. We have some thumbnail search, which I'm a big fan of, and the reason I bolded it here in red is because, as I've already mentioned, Control Center is the full-blown client, right? It's got all the bells and whistles in it, and it does have a thumbnail search as well. But the thumbnail search that we started off with here in the Easy Client, I'm just a big fan of, and I think you'll see why when we go and do the live demo. It really lets you find the things that you want to very quickly in a visual manner, so you're not scrubbing timelines and things of that nature. We do have 3 different type of export formats that we can use. Our DVT proprietary format, of course, which can be watermarked and verified within Control Center itself to make sure it hasn't been tampered with. Great for submitting to court, etc. We've always had AVIs, another option, but anybody that's exported anything under AVI knows that there's some issues with that as well. We'll talk about that when we go into the exporting live demo. And then, of course, just recently we've added bookmarks. Bookmarks are another great way to just add a little addendum to a piece of video, not necessarily exporting it, but if something you think might be of interest to you or possibly your teammates later on, you can just slap a little bookmark on there, put a little information on there. And eventually the bookmark will go away once the video gets overwritten. However, it'll be there in case you need to go find it again. So one thing I do want to point out, if you look right below the picture right there, we do now have a secured connection, a TLS connection between the Easy Client web interface and our transcoder, which is serving up the video to the Easy Client. So that's a great new feature as well. We can't really go into the administration and see all that. We're just going to do the live demo, but that's one of the things our customers, again, were asking for, and we have provided. Now, ADO, we added some Easy Client enhancements just recently. Again, I've mentioned a few of them already. It's been out since 7.0, right, a couple of years ago. The first one up at the top right now is really a cool one because before we added this enhancement, the transcoder in the Latitude system would transcode the video to MJPEG. And that's really the only choice that you had. Now we do have an option to use the native H.264. It's just a little slider in our settings. We'll point that out when we get into it. But what you'll see there in those little boxes below there, the top one's very important. When you don't have to transcode to another format, i.e. from H.264 to MJPEG, it basically acts as a media server and takes a lot of the CPU load off of that transcoder. It's just basically, again, used as a proxy. Adaptive streaming, I already mentioned, that was a new addition right here. One thing I did not mention, it is mentioned in this slide, this is a FLIR camera only multi-stream encoding solution. It's automatic, the system does it, reaches out. The Easy Client allows you to reach out and have actually 2 different streams. The full-blown Control Center, of course, again, the full-blown system is designed to do more. That'll actually let you use up to 4 streams if you have the capability from the camera. The new setting I was mentioning up there, it's changing it to the H.264 native, and of course always see release notes for some of those limitations. Now, if you look at the pictures down at the bottom left right here, we've got, with our dual sensor camera in playback, you actually have the option to toggle between the visible light image, basically from one sensor, or toggle back to the thermal sensor. And you can also, we have a picture-in-picture function as well. I don't have one of these cameras to show this off, but the picture-in-picture function, I think people are familiar with. You can look at the large image of either one that you want with the smaller one inside, and then just toggle back and forth that way as well. And then finally, the last enhancement, the snapshots, which is just taking a picture of what you're looking at any scene. Used to be handled the same way that video clips were handled. As soon as you did either one, it used to go to the notification area, which is a little flag in the top right that we're going to see, and then you would handle it from there. However, our customer said, you know what, we take snapshots for a big reason. We want to get that information out as quick as possible, send an email possibly to somebody. So we made the easy change. Now thumbnails, as soon as you click on it, it automatically downloads it based on your browser settings, and then you can get rid of that information or send it out to whoever you need to. All right, finally, I said this is going to be a quick slide presentation, and it is, because we're closing it out and just pointing out that we do have resources for you, and we definitely would like to see you and interact with you as well. Excuse me. You can see the path now. The US FLIR website has changed recently. I had to change the slide, but basically you just go to FLIR, and if you look on the right-hand side in the little bar on the top, you'll see support. You click there, you click training, and then when you go to security courses, you have the available things that are showing up on the top right there. We do in-person Latitude certification classes, myself and Chris around the world, online training videos. This is a great repository of information, even for guys that come to the Latitude class, possibly they don't use the system for a while, they come back, all of the basic modules are broken down, so you can actually learn them or relearn them at your leisure. And then, of course, the far right one is the interactive webinar, which you are participating in right now. And again, glad to have you. All right, and with that said, we're going to go to a live demo. And as I mentioned in my preview, I do want to find out and see if we have any questions. Let's go ahead and take a look down here. All right, looks like a couple of basic questions that Chris batted away with ease. So let's go ahead now, and we're going to come out of our slide presentation, and let's go ahead and go to our easy client. I just want to hit a little refresh here, because I think what it's going to tell me to do, let me just do this again, refresh. I've had this browser open for a while, and I know that sometimes it does tell you to refresh it if you haven't already. All right, now we're just going to log in, and again, we're going to point out, we're just going to walk through the basic steps. Chris is going to be managing the question queue. And you can see a couple of things right now when we first go here. Now, as I mentioned, we're just going to start off talking about we have live or playback, right? It's toggling back and forth with no cameras over there. It doesn't look a whole lot different right now, but it is a separate thing. Live, you can see this is our camera tree over on the left-hand side. All of your available cameras that you have access to are listed there. If you were possibly need a text search of some kind, let's see. So, for instance, there's a back patio camera. If everything was named in a similar naming nomenclature, if I were just to type in certain things, you can see back is in all three of those. As soon as I go to P, it removes anything that doesn't have that. I think most people understand how to use the text filter. All right, keep in mind how many thumbnails are displayed here is based on how many cameras you have access to. You'll notice this is a residential shot from the Midwest in the United States, so we're not going to zoom around and look at too much stuff. We needed a system that was up and running perfectly, and this one is. So on the left-hand side is simply the camera catalog area. The only difference in viewing cameras than the regular control center is you don't drag cameras over, you simply click. Now, one thing to point out, I'll click a camera here, and when I click the camera, you'll notice it uses the entire area that it has available. That's something that's called responsive design. Our guys were very happy about putting this together and utilizing that cool new function. And what I mean by utilizing the area it has together, or it has to display, you notice there's no layouts anywhere like there is in Control Center. So if we were to add a second camera simply by clicking on it, again, you can see it utilizes the area it has. I could click all 6 in here, regardless of what browser this is. This is Chrome, so I would have access to 9 if I needed it. But you can see how it's done. If I added a third, it would be here, a fourth would be here, and then if I added a fifth and sixth, it would stack them just like it's looking over here. Again, keeping in mind, it's utilizing the real estate that it has. Here's an example. I'll collapse the camera catalog right here with this little button. And you can see the live view adjusts to the available space that it does have. One thing that was pointed out in the webinar this morning by someone that they said that they like to use this in full screen. So what they'll do is, oops, I have a different F11. They'll just click on the F11 screen, and you can see now I have collapsed the camera catalog, and I just have my display area here. So it looks a little bit more like just the application itself and not a web browser. You lose all the browser bars and all that other kind of stuff. So I brought it back, and again on live, the only thing really to point out here are the overlays on the screen right here. Live viewing is pretty straightforward stuff, right? I can full screen it, the little button here, and I actually have a touch screen monitor right now. Actually, it's touchscreen optimized, so you can just slide with your finger, or you can rotate using the arrows right here. And again, either escape or the same little buttons up at the very top knock you back down into the regular view. Now, one other thing to point out, I guess, right here in the live view, again, like I pointed out here, was the on-screen overlays. This is the snapshot that we talked about. We just made that adjustment based on customer request. As soon as you click on snapshot, it takes the snapshot. And if this was not an F11, you would actually see it already downloading. Let's come back out of there a little bit so we can, there it is. It's trying to download as we speak. And there is the picture. I can put it wherever I want. Just throw it to the desktop. And it goes down. All right, so again, we did that based on a customer request. The other image that you see on here is the same as the playback image you see up here. If I click on playback without choosing it from a camera, it simply goes to playback, and then I touch one in the camera catalog, which then puts it into the display area, which is one camera at a time, which we'll see. So again, the only other things now in the live view to talk about are in the top right corner. These two icons right here, you'll notice right here, it sort of looks like an alert, and that's exactly what it is. As I mentioned, we added alarms to the system, and Chris fired off an alarm so I could see something in my queue. Right next to it right here, this is for exports, right? This is where snapshots and video used to go. Snapshots don't go here anymore, so only the video clips, when you go to export them, the flag will light up with a number, and you can go in there and manage it, either download it or eventually throw it away. Over here is the login, basically who's logged in, and that is me. If I drop it down here, you can see there's a couple of different things. The first thing, of course, is the help files. It's good to show those. Very in-depth help files. The very first thing I did when I got the Easy Client was I looked at the help files. Walks you right through it. It's a very intuitive interface. Has anything that you want to find out about exporting or alarms, etc. It's quite useful. Oops. All right, let's come out of here. Oh, my GoToMeeting software got in the way over here. Hold on one second. I don't know what I have to do. F11. Almost messed myself up there. All right, so now we're back at the Easy Client. So anyway, the other things I wanted to show over here, of course. Now, if the software is in your way and you can't see, you can actually grab the tab up on top of the software and slide it over to the left. But you can see here, again, there's where I'm logged in. That was the help files. About shows you the version, and logging out doesn't need any explanation. But what we do need to point out is this new addition. And if I click on settings, you can see in the middle of the screen what it's done now. I have it on by default, and it is on by default. This is the native H.264 thing that we talked about. You can really see this. I didn't want to mess with the system too much, but for instance, on your transcoder, if you're setting your transcoder settings really low and turn this off, you'll see not very good quality video, right? Because your transcoding it down to a really low resolution when it changes it to MJPEG. But if you turn on the H.264, the native setting, it just passes through as a media server, as we talked about, takes a whole load off of the CPU on the transcoder. And the video will look, of course, better in that demonstration because it's not knocking it down to 120p or whatever you did in the transcoder. So we've added a few buttons as well. There's a couple of cosmetic things, I think. Again, customer requests. They said, hey, we like this, but can you make this a little different, that a little different? That's one thing I really like about even in my certification classes. We always are trying to seek information from people who use our stuff in the field. How can we make it better? What feature could we add? How could we change something, etc. All right, that is the live view. And even though I didn't mention it in the agenda, I still want to go down here and take a look and see if we have any questions on just live view. All right, looks like we've got a couple here. Well, the question basically is, why do we have the limit of 9 cameras to view it? Again, one of the biggest things I think that drove that decision was the fact that the Easy Client is the lightweight, feature-rich, companion to Easy Client. It was not designed to do everything that the Easy Client can do, or excuse me, that Control Center can do, literally just by design. We've added new functions and features, and that's, I'll definitely our programmers and Gico, who's our project manager on Latitude, gets all this information. So we'll feed you the question, and if enough people need more cameras, well, I'm sure that's something that we could work on as well. Okay. All right, all the other questions look like they have been answered. So let's now go to our playback, which is just the icon here that I talked about. And again, as I mentioned, it takes me to playback if I just go here and I click a camera to move it over. However, in live, the same thing works if I just go directly from a camera. One more thing that I forgot to mention on the live overlay, if I come over on the right-hand side, this is actually a PTZ, and you can see this is not, that's why it does not have one. The controls come up here. We do have access to presets, etc. Again, I don't know where anything of these are pointing, and I don't want to scare this person's neighbor, so we're not going to move it around, but it's quite easy, has the same functions that pretty much any PTZ control that I've ever seen has. All right, now what I was going to say was we go to playback and we simply come down here and go to playback, and it puts the camera in there for us. You'll notice, again, it's one camera at a time, and you'll also notice those thumbnails that are being displayed across the bottom. It's showing us basically the last day. That's the default when you first come into playback, and you can see up here why that is, because it says show last day, and if you look over here, it even says the duration is 24 hours. Now, I can go into either one of these things and change the date and time for my from and my to, or I can utilize this yellow bar down here, which is one of my favorite things that we added to the original Easy Client. You'll notice if I take this and slide it down a little bit, now it changes this to custom, right? Because it's not one of the options that we have just off of the menu, but it also displays over here exactly what we're looking at based on this yellow bar on top of the timeline. You can see here there is no video here. Obviously, that's the future. We cannot go into the future. And if we had any missing video, possibly recording on motion or something like that, that would be listed right in. You'd see the blocks in here missing, just like you do in regular Control Center's timeline. We can utilize other functions as well. We can grab this, slide it around if we want to. We can actually use the play and forward, and the actual timestamp will move forward. But you'll notice, as I mentioned before, what controls the thumbnails across the bottom here basically are two things, and they're the same thing because they're tied together. The times that are listed up here on this bar and this yellow control basically down here that you can either move around, again, redisplays them, because the very beginning, you can see right here represented by the first thumbnail, the very end of this represented by the last thumbnail. And the reason I really like this, and this is what I was talking about before in that slide deck, was this is such an easy thing to drill down. Because for instance, we have a good example right here. You can see the car is in the parking lot, it's in the driveway, it's in the driveway, it's not in the driveway. So what's going to happen is, to drill down, it's so easy. All you do is you double click on this one, and what's going to happen is it's going to redistribute all of these thumbnails. This is going to be the one in the top left. The one next to it's going to be the one right where it still is, and it's going to fill in that time gap here in these other thumbnails. So you'll see this. Check it out. I'm going to double click. There's the one we clicked on. Car's still there. And you can see this is the visual part I was talking about. I could actually double click on this one, and it would go from 340 to 347, somewhere within that 7 minutes. But if I do that, I don't want to, see what was actually going on there. Again, this is not my house, so we're not going to do it. But obviously, you saw how easy it was to do that. I double click here. Now I'm down within, a 7 minute period of time. That's generally close enough for me in my timeline, and I can go grab what I need to grab and export it, etc. from the top. Now, again, we just to knock it down so it's a lot smaller. Let's just look over the last 5 minutes. Knock it down here even further. I like to, if I'm going to export something, I don't want to do it too long. It'll do it long enough. I think there's a limit still of 4 hours. But again, if you're exporting 4-hour clips, that's probably what you might want to contemplate using Control Center to do. It can do it, but it's going to take a little while, right, through the Easy Client. It doesn't have all the beef and all the engine power basically the Control Center does have. So anyway, I've knocked down just down to basically a minute 41, which tells me right up there. And if I go to export this function, you can see I have 3 choices, the same exact 3 choices that we have in Control Center. We've always had DVT. This is the one that we recommend. It is proprietary to FLIR, and it can be watermarked and actually made sure that it has not been tampered with. We can actually validate clips within the system itself. We have always had AVI as well. That's another choice. We sometimes run into some codec issues with that. MP4 is the newest addition that we've just added, both in Control Center and in the Easy Client. I'm a big fan of MP4 because it also gives us the ability to validate an image. Or excuse me, a video clip. It just does it slightly different than how DVT does it. DVT has an embedded checksum file that you don't even see. It's like part of the DVT file. That's why it's always been able to be validated and watermarked. The MP4 does it as well, but it does it with an external file. So you'll see if we exported an MP4 and went to the actual place where it exported to, we would have 3 files in there actually. One, the MP4 video file that I could just play in any Windows Media Player, no problem, but also an external checksum file and another file that goes along with it, an indexing file. And as long as you keep them in the same root folder, then you can still perform the validation. And what do I mean by that? You could take that MP4 file, bring it into Control Center itself and validate the clip. Now you can't play it, right? Because Control Center only plays DVT files, but you can validate the clip. Again, as long as the checksum files are in the same exact root folder as the video file itself. Now, there are a couple of limitations on the other two. DVT is, of course, the recommended one for the reasons we've already discussed. AVI, again, I've never been a huge fan of AVI, and this is another reason why I don't like it. Is via the Easy Client. This is not a limitation in Control Center, but Easy Client does have this limitation based on the HTML, I'd imagine. But basically, a 720p is your max resolution that you can export. So if you got a 4K camera, you're not going to be wanting to be exporting that via the Easy Client through AVI. But that's it. That's as long as you know the limitation is there, you can easily avoid it. MP4 does have a limitation as well, and again, it's a small limitation, but you do have to know about it. If you have privacy mask in your video that you're exporting, MP4 will not work. I don't know why it won't work. It's some sort of technology thing, but as long as we know that doesn't work, we can make adjustments. Either you take the privacy mask off, but that wouldn't make too much sense because the video you're going back to export is probably going to be something that already had it on. So just keep in mind, if you're exporting under MP4 with a privacy mask, can't do it. All right, so let's just do a really quick DVT file. You can see the export, and as I mentioned before, the flag lights up in the navigation area, and if you click the flag, you can actually see the video being rendered, and then once it's fully rendered, you'll see another little icon pop up right here next to the trash can to download it. Now again, snapshots used to do the very same thing here, but we've changed that, so those are automatic. So the only thing you're going to find up in here are your video clips that you've exported. Even if I were to actually export or download this now to my machine, it would still stay in this queue to be managed by whoever's managing these things. You do have to actually go to the trash can and throw it away, if that's what you want. Now you'll notice right here next to that queue is my alarm queue, and if I click on that, you can see that I have some alarms in here. Again, these were generated strictly just for this video. But if I click on the alarm itself, you can see if there was a camera attached to it, and actually you can't because this was our True Witness camera, which is basically a handheld device that you can walk around with, and it comes in to the system as a regular IP camera. It's one of the cool functions we've had for quite some time. So that he set one up using that. He's actually overseas right now and not back in the States where the systems are. So anyway, you can see the alarms of this very same thing, clear, or we have the clear all or clear one at a time. It is cached to your browser, right? Your browser cache. If you clear your browser cache, the alarms in them will go away. However, if you have other alarms that come in, you'll still get them. Or if you have, like, say, for instance, I did it to myself one time. I set up a motion alarm to the road, and it was a very busy road. And 2 days later, I came back. I had about 450 alarms. It only shows 100. And that's what I was getting at. There is a limit that it'll show up to 100. But if you handle all those, or if you clear out all 100, other ones will come back as soon as you log back in. So that is let's see, there's one more thing that I do want to show. Obviously, we pointed out we're not going to be able to see this camera. And that is, again, one of the last additions that we added in one of the last LUs. And that is this little guy right here. And this is the bookmark, right? We've always had the bookmark capabilities from Control Center. Now we've added it into the Easy Client as well, again, based on customer request. So you can see right here, any place you're at. I do want to point out that down here as well, the visual search, again, I'm a big fan. If you want to go to if you see something, you just click on it and the tab automatically goes there. We can zoom in and out on our timeline using these functions here. If I go out, it goes to 5 minutes, you can see. If I go out again, it goes out to 30 minutes and then an hour, and so forth. And then I can use this one to drill back in. Now, sometimes people are watching their video and they get a little bit lost, or they say, okay, now show me the last whatever, and I miss it. If you click this button, it'll always center the yellow tab wherever that's at, dictated again by the time that's showing up here. So keep those little figures in mind. But the bookmarks is what we were mentioning before. I'll move my timer to here, say, and say that's where I wanted to create a bookmark. I can simply put something in here, some sort of information. I'll just put in test 1, create it. And now you can see there is a little annotation there. You might not be able to see it because of this, but it is there. And it is also reflected down here in the visual thumbnails search. If I were to add another one here, say, add a bookmark, let's call it test 2, you can see how easy it is. And again, represented again by the time stamp or the time block, basically represented by the thumbnail for where that bookmark is. Now, with that said, I'm looking around trying to see if there's something I forgot. That was a sort of quick rendition or sort of a walkthrough of all of the features and functionalities that are in there now. As before, we always seek advice, and any features that we could possibly add or make it stronger somehow. So let's go ahead and take a step back here to the question queue. And let's see here. Well, there's a question about the web security, basically, and that's something I mentioned on the slide deck. We do, I think it was one of the last 7.0 LUs that we actually added our lockdown functions, basically, our system security functions that allow us to block both the camera streaming to the archiver and the transcoder streaming to the Easy Client. So yes, they're done separately, right? There's 2 different settings on 2 different tabs, right, in the system settings in the admin center, but they can easily be done as well. Lock it down. Now, once you do that, of course, and you can tell right now mine is not done. How do I know this? Look up here. Not secure, right? That's the whole point. We're coming in through the regular open browser right now because it's just a test environment. But if you did have a real environment, I would imagine you would want to lock that down if you're going to utilize the Easy Client a lot. As I've mentioned, I have guys in class all the time doing the certification classes, and over the last 2 years that the Easy Client has been out, we've really seen a lot of adoption. Customers are recognizing, especially when we added more and more features to it, they're recognizing that it kind of does what they needed to do, and it gives them much more mobility. It gives them the ability to not to have a dedicated machine in their command center. Speaking of command centers, I've actually seen a full-blown command center on the East Coast here in the US that actually uses the Easy Client in their command center because they like it so much. But so again, I like talking about it. I like pointing it out. It was added in 7.0. We try to get this information out there as much as possible so people understand what we actually have to offer. So with that said, again, let me look down here. Chris, I will bring you in here. I know you've been manning the queue. Anything else you'd like to add to the Easy Client demo? Chris, do we have you?
I think at this point the questions queue is still clear.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks, Chris. What I'll do then is what I do in every webinar. Please reach out to us. My email is marty.major@flir.com. First name dot last name MARTY MAJOR. Send me an email. Let me know what you want us to do next. I like having these interactive webinars, answering the questions we can, and showcasing some of the cool new features that we're bringing to the table every time we come out with an update. So I'll let everybody get back to their day, and I appreciate everybody coming, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thanks.